Mark 1 verses 1 to 8 is the account of John the Baptist's ministry and of Jesus' baptism by John. In this little lesson, we are going to look at the prepositional phrases that occur in Mark 1 verses 1 to 8. Chapter 8 in Bill Mounce's grammar deals with two things, prepositions and the verb emi. We are going to work through Mark 1 verses 1 to 8, pausing to examine each occurrence of a prepositional phrase and analyzing the nouns or pronouns that are used with them. You might want to have a copy of Mark's Gospel open, preferably in Greek and in English, so that you can follow along and see the context of the phrases that we are studying. In verse 2, we encounter the statement, Gegraptai ento Isaiah. It is written in Isaiah, Gegraptai ento Isaiah. The preposition en with the dative means in. This is very easy to remember. En and in are essentially the same word. The article to is dative masculine singular. You have to memorize the article. So the moment you see to, your mind should say dative masculine singular or possibly dative neuter singular. Let's look a little bit at the word Isaiah, obviously the name of Isaiah the prophet. The stem vowel is alpha. This tells you quickly that you're looking at a first declension noun. It's a diagnostic for the first declension. The personal ending is iota, which has subscripted. Iota is the personal ending for all dative singulars. So when you see iota as a personal ending, there's a good chance you're looking at a dative singular. When it is subscripted, it is absolutely, certainly a dative singular. By the way, on Isaiah being masculine, even though it's first declension, presumably it's given an alpha ending and put in the first declension because the Hebrew name ends with the R sound, Isaiah. You couldn't really make it Isaiah. Wouldn't work. Also in verse 2, prosopusu. Prosopusu. This means before your face, literally before the face of you. The preposition pro with the genitive means before. It wasn't one of the ones that you had to learn in this chapter, so if it's unfamiliar, don't worry about it. Pro with the genitive means before. Now have a look at the noun prosopu. You immediately see the stem vowel is omicron. What does that tell you? It tells you it is second declension, and therefore it could be masculine or neuter. The personal ending is upsilon. Prosopu. Upsilon is the personal ending for the genitive singular. So even if you don't know the noun prosopu, just by looking at it, you can see that it is masculine genitive singular or possibly neuter genitive singular. It's second declension. Prosopusu, before your face. In verses 3 and 4, we find the phrase ente eremo. Ente eremo, meaning in the desert. En with a dative means in. The article te is dative feminine singular. Aside from the fact that you have to memorize the article, the iota subscript immediately would tell you that it's dative singular, and the eta would tell you that it is feminine. So even if you hadn't memorized it, you could still get by. Have a look at the noun eremo. Eremo. You immediately see that the stem vowel is omega. This tells you that it is second declension. The personal ending is iota, which has subscripted. You should know immediately dative singular. The moment you see that subscript, it's dative singular. So eremo is a second declension, dative singular. Eremo is actually a rare example of a feminine second declension noun. The overwhelming majority are masculine or neuter. This one's feminine. There's a clue. even if you didn't know the noun eremo, is a clue that it's feminine, and that clue is the article. Remember that eremo must agree with the article. So the fact that the article is dative feminine singular should give you a clue that eremo is also dative feminine singular. Ente eremo, in the desert. In verse 4, we also have the phrase eis aphesin hamartion. Eis aphesin hamartion. This means for the forgiveness of sins, or perhaps more literally, unto the forgiveness of sins. Eis with the accusative means into or unto, and sometimes has the sense of for. Eis with the accusative, into or unto. Aphesin is a third declension noun. We're only going to learn that later in the course. One interesting thing about it, if you have a look at the personal ending, nu, it is the dative singular personal ending, the same one you use in the first and second declensions, and it is consistent. The same ending also applies to the third declension, at least in some cases. Hamartion is from hamartia, meaning sin. As a theology student, you probably know this word. If you look at it, you unfortunately can't see the stem vowel. The stem vowel would be alpha, but it's been swallowed up by the omega in own. So omega noon ending tends to gobble up the stem vowel. Makes it a little bit harder to recognize whether it's a first, second, or third declension that you are looking at. Eis aphesin hamartion, for the forgiveness of sins. In verse 5, we find pros auton. Pros auton. Pros with the accusative means to or towards. Pros with the accusative, to or towards. Auton is a pronoun, but it declines exactly like a second declension noun. So, having a look at it, the stem vowel is omicron. That omicron tells you it's second declension. Therefore, in all probability, either masculine or neuter. The personal ending is nu, which is the standard personal ending for the accusative singular. So auton is probably going to be masculine and accusative singular. Pros auton, toward him. Staying in verse 5, we have this statement, ebaptizonto hupautu. Ebaptizonto means they were being baptized. Hupautu means by him. Hupo with a genitive means by. When it's followed by a word that starts with a vowel, the omicron drops off. So notice it's not hupo autu, but hupautu. Nevertheless, it's still hupo. So hupo with a genitive means by. Autu is the same pronoun that we've just looked at. It's declining like a second declension noun. So looking at autu a little bit more, the stem vowel is omicron, telling us it's second declension, probably masculine or possibly neuter. And the personal ending is upsilon, which is the personal ending for the genitive singular. So autu is going to be genitive singular, probably masculine, but possibly neuter. Also in verse 5, ento Jordane, in the Jordan, ento Jordane. In with the dative means in. To is dative masculine singular. Once again, you should know that. But if for some reason you'd failed to memorize the article, omega combined with the iota subscript would tell you that it is dative singular, either masculine or neuter. Now look at Jordane. Stem vowel is eta, must be first declension. The personal ending is iota that is subscripted, so it must be dative singular. Jordane, though, is masculine. You can tell that from the article. The article is masculine singular, so Jordane must be masculine singular. It's ironic. we tell you that most first declension nouns are feminine, and indeed that is true. And yet in this little text there have been a couple of exceptions. But notice that the exceptions are often words that are borrowed from other languages. Hesaya, Jordane are both borrowed from Hebrew or Aramaic, and that's the reason that they have forms that don't really fit Greek. So you enter Jordane, in the Jordan. Now we move to verse 6, where we find peri ten osfunautu. Peri ten osfunautu. Peri, I think, is another one that you didn't have to learn for chapter 8, but peri with the accusative means around. Around. Easy to remember again, just think of perimeter, the English word being borrowed from peri. So peri, around. Ten is accusative feminine singular. You would have memorized that. Osfun is a third declension noun, so you don't need to know it yet. It means waist. By the way, in the third declension, as in the first and second declensions, the personal ending nu is characteristic of the accusative singular. So that's something you actually know, even though you haven't done third declension nouns yet. Altu, we've already talked about, should be a familiar word by now. You can see the stem vowel omicron tells us second declension, personal ending upsilon, genitive singular. Altu, probably masculine genitive singular, meaning of him. Peri ten osfunautu, around his waist. And finally, verse 8, we have baptise humas en pneumati agio. Baptise, he will baptize humas you en pneumati agio, in the Holy Spirit. En with the dative means in. Pneumati is a third declension noun, so you don't need to learn it yet. But note, by the way, that the iota personal ending is characteristic of the dative singular. So you actually already know that, even though you don't know it. Hagio, the word for holy, although it's an adjective, has a few characteristics that are easy for you to diagnose. Notice that the stem vowel is omega. It will be second declension, so it's going to be probably masculine or possibly neuter. And the personal ending is iota that is subscripted, so you know it's dative singular. Pneumati agio, Holy Spirit, en pneumati agio, in the Holy Spirit. Jesus, baptise humas en pneumati agio, he will baptize you in the Holy Spirit.